forward to that. And for those of you who don't know, the Forest Stewards Guild is a nationwide organization that both practices on the ground and also promotes more generally through things like this webinar stewardship. And that's the overarching goal, is to forge a healthy future for both people and forests. So we really see that as a reciprocal relationship where people need to care for the forest and we benefit from the forest caring for us. So that's our mode, and I think we'll think a lot about that sort of reciprocity. Biochar is a good example of that. So in prepping for this, I thought, well, let's get some kind of definition. I'm sure there are a lot of different definitions, but let's get some sort of definition of biochar up on the screen. And this is one I stole from the U.S. Biochar Initiative. I changed it a little bit, I think. But basically, we're talking about charcoal made through pyrolysis, which is, let's see, we're going to just, do a little muting there. Sort of a heating with limited oxygen. And one of the key things here is it is essentially inert and persists in soil for centuries, forever. There's certainly archaeological, you can go back and find biochar in soils all over the world from ancient times. So certainly long lived. And we know that it has a lot of benefits, from retaining water, storing carbon, and because of the cation exchange capacity of biochar, it maintains a lot of nutrients. So important for a lot of applications, from growing trees to your garden. And today we're forest focused, so there are a lot of different ways to think and use biochar, but our main focus today is forestry. And that obviously there are a lot of different applications, and there's bleed over, et cetera, et cetera. So we can dip into agricultural connections. That's important too, but this is, again, my own selfishness. The Forest Stewards Guild is forest focused, and so that's where we'll start today. And then the other point I wanted to make is there are a lot of scales here, and so I tried to just make little cartoon images here. There's sort of a backyard scale, and I grabbed a photo of the ring of fire approach to making biochar, some brush in someone's backyard. And then at the other end of the scale spectrum, we can imagine there are giant plants that are processing, millions of tons of biochar and packaging it and selling it all over the world. So really where I think will be most of today is somewhere in between. And the somewhere in between has a lot of different looks to it. But I think in some ways that's where the trick is. And so that's why we have two experts on the call today. And the other thing we want to talk about today is things that are ready to implement. So for those of us who've been in this field a long time, we've all heard different ideas that sound great and are not quite ready for prime time. But a lot of the technology we'll be talking about today is stuff that one could go and essentially buy off the shelf. And it's really kind of some of the nuances of, okay, well, how do we actually get it working rather than does the machine function? And then as we think about biochar, one of the tricks has always been, how do we pay for it? Because it fits, at least in one way of conceiving of it, it fits under a umbrella of utilizing small diameter or low value wood that has high handling costs and other things. So it's not like a nice veneer red oak where you don't have to ask how you're going to pay for it because people are lining up with dollar bills. Um, And that gets us to this other piece that we want to insert in the conversation today, and that is carbon dioxide removal credits. And so, I grabbed this off a recent report, but the idea here is to sell credits for taking carbon out of the air, essentially. And I think probably a lot of folks on the call are familiar with improved forest management credits, where you might get credit for keeping a stand of trees upright on the stump, or extending rotations or something like that. So keeping more carbon in trees. There are some challenges with that. For example, if we had some issues in California where areas that were designated to store carbon burned in a wildfire. So people have also been thinking about, well, what are the other ways to store carbon? Well, if we put it in something that takes carbon out of the air, that's maybe a little bit more something you can rely on, right? It's not going to burn up in a wildfire. So these carbon dioxide removal credits are an active market. And one of the options is biochar. And there are a bunch of policy barriers, process barriers, application barriers, etc. So that's sort of what we'll be talking about today. And I grabbed this from a recent paper that I'll add into the chat in a little while. So with that, I want to get to the meat of what we're here today for, and that is some experts from the field who are doing this day to day, 40 hours a week sort of thing. And we have two wonderful presenters, and I'm thrilled they both were willing to help us out today. And Kaarsten Turner, I'll introduce first, although I think maybe she's presenting second. I've known her a long time. She also sits on the Forest Stewards Guild Board of Directors, but her career, she's been in the field for, well, 3 decades or so, and really focused on building, co-creating these nature-based solutions. And she has expertise around the intersection of finance and natural resources, particularly forest management. She's worked in carbon markets, environmental stewardship, and she's worked across the country as well as internationally. So she brings a wide range of insights and is based up in Conifer, Colorado, and now is working through North Fork Advisors on biochar and CDR options. So very glad to have Kaarsten with us today. And our other presenter, Tim, I was connected with through a friend, and it was one of those sort of once we got on the phone together, we're like, oh, and we have this connection and that connection, and it was really exciting to realize that there were other folks that I hadn't met before out doing this great work. Tim McAbee is the founder and CEO of Desired Future Conditions, a company that's a nature-based carbon removal project development company. And right now, their initial focus is on in-woods biochar production in the North America. But Tim is a professional certified forester and graduate of the New York Ranger School and SUNY ESF in Syracuse. So he knows his stuff from the woods on out. And he's worked in timber procurement, forestry consulting, timberland investments, and carbon markets for decades, and currently based in Tallahassee. So one of the great things about our presenters today is we've got a little sort of regional difference and sort of different approaches to a similar issue. Okay, so with that, I will stop sharing, and I think we'll turn it over to Tim if you're ready. Oh, you're muted.
Gosh, you can always count on the muted
Yeah,
technical
right.
difficulties.
It's not a webinar unless somebody is, yeah. So now we got that out of the way. Thank you, Tim.
Great. Okay, let's try the screen share again, and I'll do the same thing as last time, and hopefully it works. Let me go into presenter mode. Okay, can you see the full screen?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, great. All right, let's get going here. First, I want to start off by saying thanks again to Xander and the Forest Stewards Guild for hosting the webinar, and it is also a pleasure to be on this panel alongside my respected and longtime colleague, Kaarsten Turner. So today we're going to be talking about biochar and carbon solutions for working forests from desired future conditions perspective. Just a quick introduction to DFC about the company and its purpose. We make premium ag-grade biochar from waste biomass on forests and rangelands in North America. In 10 years, we aim to have deployed 50 crews and 100 biochar machines to produce 60,000 tons of biochar and generate 132,000 durable carbon dioxide removal credits annually worth around $30 million. And we do this by contracting for waste biomass from forests on rangelands, bringing the pyrolyzer machines on site into the woods to produce biochar and subsequently the CDR credits. And the outcome is ecosystem restoration and healthy, higher value properties. So this presentation will unpack what that actually looks like and what it may mean for you as a landowner or forest manager. I'm going to skip over my introduction since Xander did that for me. I just wanted to recognize my co-founder, Sarah Westcott, who brings a unique experience and set of skills, having worked across most of the carbon market value chain, from offset project registries, administering protocols and projects, and training verifiers, all the way to upstream project development and downstream demand roles. It's just the two of us. We're a nimble team, but a mighty one, and we have plans to expand the team as we grow. And a big part of that expansion also includes partnerships. So please, to the audience, don't be afraid to contact us after the webinar. We'd love to talk and explore opportunities where we might be able to collaborate. Okay, so why are we here talking about biochar and carbon removal markets? I'm going to kind of skim through this because most of you are probably aware of this thing called climate change and the potential risks associated with continuing to emit greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And whether you're a climate warrior or a climate denier, there is a movement that's left the train station to budget our emissions. And part of that involves reducing emissions. The other part is removing carbon. And while it's really hard work, it is spurring an age of innovation that is changing how we think about energy and economies. And in my mind, as a forester, this really all falls under sustainability. And that's where I think most of us can find common ground. And biochar can contribute to reducing emissions, removing carbon, and sustainability. So biochar is one of the solutions to the world needing carbon removals. Biochar is being rediscovered as black gold due to its durable carbon removal features and tangible benefits from sustainable, low carbon intensity end-use applications. And the biochar value chain can really be broken down into 3 pillars, and you'll see that as a theme throughout my presentation. But just quickly, where does DFC fit in it all, right? The 3 pillars are feedstock, production, and application. And desired future conditions focuses on feedstock from forestry and rangelands, mostly from biofuel reduction and forest management activities. So accessing the forestry and logging residues. We use pyrolysis technology that is mobile, and we'll take a look at what that actually looks at. And then in the application we're targeting end-use markets with agribusinesses and construction material manufacturers, either as a soil amendment or as an additive into cement, and asphalt. We're also targeting biochar as a remediation agent. So just to kind of visualize our fit into the biochar value chain, again, the three pillars here. Our business model consists of contracting for waste biomass feedstock on large private forest and rangelands. There's an abundance of low-cost waste biomass in the U.S. that we are targeting. We're using mobile biochar pyrolyzers produced by a company called Air Burners that is out of Florida. Everything is made in the USA. It uses air curtain technology. You can see that it's on axles there, triaxle with wheels. It has a Hatch diesel engine in the front there that mostly is responsible for running a fan, right? And it blows through a manifold over the top and creates an air curtain that limits the amount of oxygen that's taking place in the thermochemical reaction. But you essentially can load biomass that fits into it. It has a V-panel floor. One side shakes, and as the biomass is pyrolyzing, little pieces break off, fall through that floor onto a conveyor belt, and then you see it comes out the back end into a water quencher. Once we produce the biochar, we then have the option to sell it into end-use markets, apply it back on site, and if we can use, if the end-use application continues to store the carbon long-term, then we can generate the CDR credit and sell those into the carbon markets as well. So just a quick slide on for illustrative purposes so that we can unpack what a DFC in-woods mobile biochar project look like from a landowner value proposition. This is a hypothetical project that lasts for 10 years and is basically constructed in a way where we come on and add one DFC biochar crew per year for the first 5 years, so that for the remaining 5 years of the project, or the last 5 years, we have 5 crews in full operation. And you'll see what a DFC biochar crew looks like in a subsequent slide. But the value proposition to the landowner is essentially a payment for the feedstock, in that we can pay pulpwood-like prices. There's a lot of literature and research, right? Getting low value biomass out of the woods has been studied quite extensively over the past few decades. And generally the cost to get it out of the woods and to a production site, including cut, skin, and haul, is somewhere around $40 per ton. And so just depending on a particular property and the circumstances there, we can offer a payment for that feedstock by reducing the costs associated with hauling biomass to an offsite production mill. Also lowers the carbon emissions. Yeah. We're also open to a revenue share. So DFC has a clearing price that we need to hit for the sale of the biochar, the physical biochar, and the CDR credits, which are below kind of market spot prices today. And that what that does is if we can market the products for a higher price, then DFC will share revenue on the difference between that. So the economics here kind of illustrate a 10-year project where we add 1 crew for the first 5 years, and then operate 5 crews for the second 5 years. And you can show that the revenue incentive is there and lines up. So just dive a little deeper into what a biochar carbon project actually is, right? So these 3 pillars, the feedstock acquisition, biochar production, and end-use application. We're going to unpack a little bit of what each phase looks like so we can better understand the context. But in general, feedstock, right, it's got to come from a waste stream. We're targeting the Climate Action Reserve protocol, the biochar protocol for U.S. and Canada, which they do allow biomass grown purpose-grown biochar, which you have to take into account the emissions associated with growing that biomass. They're kind of indifferent on the biochar technology and the production. So pyrolysis is allowed, mobile biochar units are allowed. And then to create that CDR credit, right, just going back to making sure that the biochar goes into an end use that continuously stores that carbon long term. So just to unpack the feedstock a little bit, right? Carbon removal credits are generally created by comparing the emissions associated with a business as usual scenario and the emissions associated with the project scenario. So if the emissions associated with the project scenario are less than the business as usual scenario, the difference can be quantified, adjusted for other accounting principles like durability and leakage, and issued as credits that can be used as compensatory instruments against emissions that have occurred elsewhere. So what are the business as usual emissions associated with producing biochar from forestry/feedstock? Well, it's pile burning or just spreading back out into the woods and left for near-term decomposition. So that's an eligibility requirement as part of a biochar carbon project is the feedstock and the business as usual fate associated with the baseline scenario. Another thing about biochar is not all biochar is created equally, and as such, there are different kinds of biochar with different physical and chemical profiles, and this is most influenced by two things: feedstock and production technology. So if we start with feedstock, one kind of feedstock may be better suited over another depending on the end use or additional processing steps associated with the final product. And DFC targets woody waste biomass to create a premium biochar that can be fit for a wide range of end-use applications. Key takeaways: woody biomass generally has better overall suitability for different applications. So if woody biomass makes a great feedstock, how do we get it? Mill residues is an obvious place to start since they have a supply of eligible waste biomass, but that supply is at near equilibrium. DFC is going into the woods to tap into a massive supply of seed stock and cutting out the haul or transportation costs to the production site, an offsite production site, which reduces costs and lowers emissions. So if feedstock is one part of the equation, technology is the other. And this is just a quick look at DFC's technology stack and our crew configuration. So again, I mentioned we're using the air burners curtain technology. The unit you see at the top is called the Charboss T26. They have a larger unit that is in final stages of development that you see pictured over to the right. This company has been in business for about 30 years, and historically they have created waste biomass incinerators. So essentially just trying to eliminate the waste, turning it into ash, and doing that in a clean, low emissions way. They, about 4 or 5 years ago, got a CRADA agreement with the U.S. Forest Service, and they modified their char box into the Charboss by adding continuous biochar production features. And that was what I explained with the shaking floor, the conveyor belt, and the water quencher. Water quencher is what essentially produces the biochar, preventing it from going to a full ash. But these are readily available machines that can be available in 10 to 12 weeks. They're EPA emissions approved, and they produce a high quality biochar. When you look at, out across all of the different ways you can produce biochar and the different kinds of feedstock that each type of technology processes. Again, the DFC biochar crew profile consists of 2 Charboss units, 1 loader or skid steer, and 2 forest technicians. And there are some other tools that go around with it, but you see some of the average production specs associated with the production of a single crew. And the DFC biochar crews are essentially the modular building block to scale projects. So depending on the property size and the feedstock availability, we can scale the project by the number of crews that are operating on the property. Just a quick mention on credit stacking, as I know some of you may manage IFM or AR carbon offset projects. Stacking biochar projects on improved forest management, afforestation, reforestation projects is permissible if additionality and all other eligibility requirements can be met and there is no double counting of credits. And there are several benefits there you see there from credit stacking. So while we are targeting sales to agribusinesses and construction material manufacturers, there are scenarios where it makes sense or could be necessary to apply the biochar back on site to the forest soils. For example, a timberland impact investor may want to improve soil health as part of a restoration project on a degraded property. Or we may have to weather a market downturn for the physical biochar. So we can apply the biochar on site kind of as a last resort to still create the CDR credit. And that revenue will cover our operating expenses. So just quickly, some of the benefits that Xander mentioned, and I'm sure you're familiar with, are soil health and structure, carbon sequestration, climate change mitigation, and other benefits such as reduced need for fertilizers, improved plant growth and yield, site remediation, and just sustainable waste management. And if you're going to apply biochar to forest soils, there are a few things to keep in mind. The first thing to recognize is that forestry lags behind a bit from agriculture in terms of biochar field application research, right? Mostly because of the long-term nature of forest management practices relative to annual row crops. But we can take a lot of the research and the trends associated with applying biochar as a soil amendment to agriculture and translate that over into applying it on forestry soils. Right, again, the application, your rates and your intervals are all kind of site factor dependent. Lower quality sites are going to see greater incremental gains compared to existing higher quality sites. An interesting thing about applying it to forest soils is that you can just spread this out as a top dressing, and the Forest Service has shown that the biochar generally remains in place when left on the surface. And in terms of rate and intervals, again, this all depends, but we're just talking in general here. It's recommended no less than 8 tons per acre to realize the benefits from biochar applications. I'll just mention the U.S. Forest Service has a lot of really useful resources on biochar and forest applications, and folks like Nate Anderson and Derek Pearson and Rick Fletcher have been researching and studying the topic for decades and are very knowledgeable and just really good people to talk with if you're interested in learning more. So it's kind of my last slide here, and just getting to the point of what does a biochar project look like on your land and the properties you manage? Well, the one way of finding out is through our no cost, no obligation feasibility study, and it's the information we need to come up with a preliminary assessment. It's pretty simple. Essentially, we need a harvest volume schedule and the property location, and we can generally turn that around in 2 to 4 weeks. I will just say we're targeting larger properties right now. That doesn't mean that we won't talk to smaller landowners, but that just means a little bit more thought needs to go into, how do you aggregate those small landowners or create other opportunities associated with getting the minimum amount of feedstock to make a project viable. And that could include if you're, you know, maybe a smaller mid-sized landowner aggregating or opening up a yard on your property where feedstock can be delivered to. There's a lot of other sources for good, high quality woody waste biomass than just forestry slash, right? It can come from a local tree service companies that are typically paying a tipping fee to landfill their waste, or a lot of folks are making mulch, but this may provide another market for them. So there are opportunities across the entire scale of landowner size, and just comes down to kind of your management objectives. But a good place to start is the feasibility study, and we do that for free. So again, please feel free to reach out if you have questions or you want to take a look at what a project might look like on your property.
Excellent.
I used to say let's make some carbon, but now I say let's make some biochar. So
that's
leave it
great.
at that.
Well, that was awesome, Tim. Thank you for speeding us through the sort of, I don't know, what a project looks like. It really helps clarify it for me. And I know folks have a bunch of questions, but I want to turn to Kaarsten with North Fork Advisors first to get a different view of very sort of same general theme, but a different approach, different geography. So, Kaarsten, take it away. Oh, now you're muted.
Oh, no, it is. Okay, thank you, Xander, for rescuing me.
No problem.
Okay, I've worked with Tim McAbee for long enough to know when to have him go first. So thank you, Tim. That was an incredibly comprehensive presentation, and I think it will dovetail perfectly into what it is that I'm going to talk about, because I'm going to do more of a local case study that's going to be conversational. So Tim's slides did a fantastic job of setting me up for that. But thank you. Yeah. So I'm Kaarsten, and I was actually looked at the attendees. It's so great to see some really familiar names that I haven't seen in a while in this collective space and conversation. And I'm just going to go ahead and say that I think I don't think it's serendipitous that we're all finding each other in this space. We've been working for decades now to try to innovate and work in climate in sustainable ways that merge all of our interests. So I'm really stoked to see everybody here. So my name's Kaarsten Turner. Like Xander said, I've been working in this space for 3 decades, and in the last couple of years, I've really been focused on engineered CDR projects, really just kind of as a result of my experience in the nature-based solution space and IFM projects. And more importantly, I think stepping down from some of the global work that I've done and looking a little bit closer to home in my own backyard, which is in Colorado, west of Denver. And I've just experienced on a personal basis, sort of firsthand evacuations, at least 4 mandatory evacuations from my own house. My insurance rates hitting a multiple of 5x, basically a second mortgage on my home, and watching sort of the cultural and community challenges, the economic and the social, of trying to get a lot of biomass out of the woods in a state that does not have much of an infrastructure. So about a year ago, sort of looked up and around, felt like I had enough of a creative idea about where I wanted to put my time and energy, and formed North Fork Advisors along with 2 other co-founders, Nathan Cook, who's an engineer who lives in Boulder, and Isaac DeGennaro, who is my COO strategy guy, has a lot of entrepreneur experience and keeps my visionary perspective grounded like a string on a balloon. So Tim, I think, spoke to this, but I'm just going to sort of mention this slide. When you look at sort of the state of CDR markets, they are emerging. And if you look over here in the second, I guess actually technically it's the third sort of carbon storage pool, and you look at where biochar is, it's technically still defined as novel and less conventional. From a readiness perspective, it's in that medium space. Mitigation potential also medium, but the beauty of this one is that from the storage and time scale, you actually move down into moderate, centuries to millennia, which is more durable and more permanent than some of the more conventional methods that we have introduced, developed, monetized over the last 3 decades. Wow, that's my big green biochar arrow. So I don't need to do this because that one's been covered. So on a personal scale, in Colorado, about 10% of Colorado's 24 million acres of forest need urgent attention to address forest health, wildfire risks, and threats to water supplies. So in 2020, the state of Colorado, the State Forest Service, in partnership with some of the USDA as well as the municipalities, came up with this Colorado Forest Action Plan. And what it did is it defined the highest risk areas for the forested land, and it included both private and federal. And what was obvious to me is if you look at this map, this is just the burn probability of Colorado. And these are the counties. So this isn't all of Colorado, but these are effectively the counties that are on the Front Range. So here we have Denver. This is Jefferson County. This is Boulder County. This is Larimer and Weld County. Over here, you start moving down into the ski resorts. But from a visual perspective, you can see that basically the Front Range is destined to burn. And by all of the climate models, in addition to the financial models and mitigation models, we are in a world of hurt if we keep moving in the direction that we're moving. So what I saw was exactly what Tim saw. So, and that is that mobile biochar and in-woods processing is going to be a really important way to sort of move the needle. Colorado doesn't have the infrastructure, the mill infrastructure, and we can do a whole nother webinar on that. But if you look at the capacity of the existing mills, most of them left in the 1980s. So there's, maybe 5 large forest products companies capable of processing, 500 million board feet a year, which isn't anywhere near where we need to be to make our ecosystems healthy. So what we did was we went to market with a project to create value across sort of 3 strategic platforms, which Tim outlined really well. But for us, the focus was wildfire mitigation and carbon removal tons, climate justice, which is a big one for the communities in Colorado. If you look at the census tracts, with the exception of Boulder, there's a pretty tight overlay between poverty, underprivileged, and wildfire risk. So the other thing that we just identified was that the communities that were had the highest threat were the least equipped to deal with mitigation expenses and costs to get the wood out of around beyond just kind of the defensible space around their forests, and that it was really going to take community partnership and a strategic advancement to think about how we could do that. So what we did was we actually went ahead and are forming a collective partnership with Jefferson County, which is back there, back to that other map, that long skinny part. And they have a bunch of slash yards that are sort of bifurcated and fragmented at different locations, primarily available in the summertime. And people just bring their slash. and that they have to turn it around and get it out. And when I say, it could be an elementary school parking lot, it could have been a fire department parking lot, but all this multiple use, they needed to be used so that people would drop their slash on the weekends, and they needed to get it out by Monday so that people could do what people needed to do in those spaces. And so we've been talking to Jefferson County about creating a semi-permanent to permanent yard, and bringing sort of this two scope. One, they have their slash yard program, and then they also just have their open space work. So bringing our mobile biochar, these are the slash piles. Tim shared a picture of that too. That's what's left behind from a residual perspective. This guy. So this is the mini. Tim shared the Char Boss. This is the baby. It's called the Burn Boss. We purchased a Burn Boss to bring into the Inwoods, with working again with Jefferson County to try to create solutions. Our little Burn Boss is a little bit lighter. It takes a manual quenching. We pull it behind a Ford 350. We just have me and Nate and Isaac, and our goal is to just partner with landowners, wildland fire districts, and get rid of their slash piles. And then also working with Jefferson County to create a semi-stationary paralysis plant, which would be a little bit different than this mobile biochar. But they've been open to it. And so we're pretty excited about developing that. That just talks a little bit about pre-feasibility, but I want to leave time for questions because I think there were a lot of them. And I'll just go ahead and start with addressing Eileen's project question, I think, which was around the permitting and regulatory risk. And that is that that actually has been a hurdle for us, working with the state air emissions board. They do have some what are supposed to be pretty straightforward permitting for the APEN air curtain burners, but it's not straightforward at all. And so I can just speak to that. And I'm happy to answer questions. So let's go ahead, Xander, and let folks have the floor for the next.
Yeah, well, and before we throw it wide open, I just want to thank you, Kaarsten and Tim. Great presentations, and yeah, I love the sort of different perspectives. So yeah, maybe Elaine, I don't know if you want to speak up and speak to the difficulty you've had with permitting in Washington State, but I know in New Mexico, it's there's been some ability to get air curtain burners, etc., permitted, but it remains a hurdle. That may change with some changes, policy changes of the new administration with EPA. But states are likely, particularly say California or Colorado, are likely to keep similar regulations in place. So it'll be ongoing. Elaine, do you want to add in?
Sure. Up here in Washington, we've been fighting with our air quality people, seems like for a long time. Last year, we were able to get the little ring of fires through the process. We actually had to change the law, but they wouldn't even consider looking at the air curtain burners. And then this year, like, what was it? It was in November where they actually pulled these mobile air curtain burners out of the Title V regulatory requirements, EPA's regulatory requirements. But that doesn't seem to be moving the needle that much here at the state, because the state implements, and it probably is the same in Colorado, the state implements EPA regs. And so I'm wondering if there's something we could do collectively that is a solution that can be applied in all these places that are resistant to this. I mean, they're using these air curtain burners in California without really much issue. Oregon is a little bit more problematic, really expensive. Idaho, they don't care. You
Right.
can use them without any problem. And so the fact that some jurisdictions are interpreting EPA differently than others, maybe there's something we can do collectively in the problem states to try to solve this. You know, if we solve it in one place, to import it if we need a regulatory change or we need a law change, to say what works in this jurisdiction that can be borrowed for the next person to try to make it easy, because it's almost impossible here in Washington. It's $20,000 every time you move the machine. It's just not even viable.
Yeah. Well, thanks for flagging that, and certainly that's of interest to the guild, and I'm guessing other organizations to at least share information, but maybe there's something more active that could be done.
I mean, I can speak to a little bit about what I've learned in Colorado, and that is just a lot of it's just education, right?
Mm.
Like folks they're not necessarily familiar with it. And so when you turn to precedents or case studies, they're not really there either, right? So a lot of it is just local conversations. Like we've been engaging our commissioners that are part of the wildfire, just part of the Wildfire Commission, and say, look, we have alternative tools. We have ones that are lower risk than pile burning, actually. And so can you help support an understanding and sort of an acceleration of getting these permits through? Because even though the permit is supposed to be streamlined, they still, right, they have, modeling determinations. And it's like, I mean, really, it's a diesel engine, basically, with some smoke that, like Tim showed you all. I mean, the manifold's running over it. It emits less than a burn pile. And you don't have to get a burn permit. You just need to get an air emissions permit. So, but I'm happy to continue that conversation or take the lead. I know it varies.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's go to the question about public lands. And then after we talk about that a little bit, John, just to warn you, I want to turn to you to just you put some good comments in the chat, but maybe we in a minute you can verbalize those. So Kaarsten or Tim, I guess Kaarsten, some of your work is public lands, county public land, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And we've been in conversation with the Forest Service as well. We haven't deployed any projects on Forest Service land. But yeah, if you count state public land and, county public land, the answer to that question is yes. And they're super stoked. They are so excited about it. In part just because the alternative is burning those slash piles. And so they're like,
for example, in this year in New Mexico, we couldn't burn slash piles because it was too dry. So yeah, I could see why they'd be excited.
Same in here. We looked at just yesterday, I looked at 1,000 slash piles at Jefferson County open space land, and they've been sitting there for 18 months because they couldn't burn them because of the weather.
Yep. And it becomes a hazard. Tim Ba, do you want to add any more to the nuances of public land projects?
Sure. Sorry, I didn't get my last name. But I'm Tim Bailey. Yeah. So in California, there's been very large subsidies for haul, and the Governor's Office of Planning Research has had a program for subsidizing biomass hauls from projects. And there's these treatment rates that get extraordinary for where there's large mortality events in high carbon forests. Treatment costs that are in the $12,000 per acre if they have long hauls. And so last fall, I don't know what the current status of this is, but the Forest Service had a period in which they had up to $20 million in haul subsidies that were kind of potentially just trying to clear these problems. And I think that the on-site biochar production is an intriguing strategy to manage that in a way. But there are particularly in post-fire landscapes where there's extreme mortality events, there's you know, a lot of the in Region 5, the Forest Service has largely a policy that they don't want to replant landscapes, that they don't do fuels management in advance of over, you know, investing in a high hazard site. So I think there's kind of a lot of spot opportunities that will be kind of have specific timeframes for these kinds of approaches.
Yeah, well, and we've certainly seen high severity on high severity fire to that point, like just burning up any seedlings that were planted. So that makes a ton of sense. And I think that sort of adds to this. I have this feeling that this is just a burgeoning opportunity once we get through some of these hurdles, like Elaine mentioned. And maybe on those lines, John, do you want to speak up a little bit about Biochar on site.org and some of the other stuff that you're working on?
Yeah, you know, thank you so much. I'm John Webster with Biochar on Site. Karina Stark is also present today. Did not intend to hijack anything here. I think what both of you folks are doing is absolutely amazing. Tim, I'm really excited to see this. It's something that when I was at USBI, we were talking about program development for exactly this type of an application. Personally, I think this is something that's going to scale in a massive way. So to address the general question, you know, right now biochar on site practices are focused on the low and mid tech. It gives us an opportunity to address those hazardous fuels. It allows us to bring in very practical, very safe, shovel ready implementation practices that will deal with some of them. That said, it doesn't necessarily address the larger scale concerns, but when we're dealing with things like burn piles, there are ways we can modify those burn piles. Kelpie Wilson's done a tremendous amount of work testing emissions on that, on ways to build piles in order to create the beneficial carbon, reduce the amount of water that's required for quenching, and also reduce scarring. Then we have the different types of flame cap kilns. The Ring of Fire, there's also one called Big Box Biochar that was developed by Darren McAvoy of Utah State University. That one you can process 40 tons a day of biomass. And it takes about 300 gallons per session to quench. That would be doing two sessions, of course. And then what Tim's doing and Kaarsten with the mechanical systems. So our focus is on the portable things that deal with that last mile, the on-site application and implementation. The folks, you know, it's where the folks are doing the actual work. It's where we can make a big difference on restoring and protecting the ecosystems, and also returning that balance about the carbon cycle. Let's disrupt it and put it to good use. We have, I do real quick, I'll wrap up by saying we do have a group of practitioners that are already out there. Biochar on Site is a program that used to be called Biochar in the Woods. It was a program that was sponsored by the U.S. Biochar Initiative through some funding from the Forest Service. We split off at the end of last year to become an independent group. We are working to attain nonprofit status. We've been working on getting a fiscal sponsor. Right now, we're all working as volunteers. So that does make it a little difficult, but you know, we notice that we're gaining traction. We encourage everybody that's interested in this practice to join our monthly call. It's the first Wednesday of every month at noon Pacific, and we use a Google Meet. The information is available at biochar-on-site.org. We also have a mailing list. We at some point will have a newsletter, but we're going to get the funding for that. And then we have the groups.io. If you're not familiar, there's biochar.groups.io, and then there's biochar.groups.io, and then a Biochar in the Woods program. And we have information about that on our website. But again, our objectives are dealing with building the community, addressing permitting, talking about insurance, kiln loan programs, working with conservation districts, educating landowners, informing on policy updates and opportunities. So Karina was very involved in getting flame cap kilns legalized in the state of Washington, and there's an article on USBI about that. So many hands make a big difference. And so we're really, again, Tim and Kaarsten, I'm just totally stoked to see what you're working on. It's really fantastic, and we need more, right? Because when we scale this when we scale wide rather than worrying about individual installs that go up, we can make a more massive impact.
Yeah, thank you, John. And I think we'll likely, a lot of people are working on this. I feel like the guild's niche might be sort of some of the forest logistics piece, or some information sharing. But obviously folks like Kaarsten, Tim, and John know way more about biochar than I do. I did share a link to kind of maybe the other end of the scale. We had a webinar, I don't know, last month with a local researcher who was published some papers on what does it look like in a place like New Mexico to put a larger facility, and how would that look in a place where, like Kaarsten was saying, we know that there's a lot of material out there. So a lot of different options out there. We're at time here, so I want to wrap up because I'm sure people are jumping off to other things. But thank you again, Kaarsten, Tim, really wonderful. And I think we'll keep talking about this. So we'll share a recording and some notes from this. But if you are participating and you have a great idea for sharing other information, please let us know. What I really want to do is get out in the woods, both in Colorado and in Florida, and see these things out in the woods. So maybe we can get some field trips scheduled later in the year or something. So we'll be doing more. And thanks everyone for participating. And yeah, like John was just saying, many hands. Everybody needs to add in their part.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks all.